Hello, everyone. I'm Tulok the Barbarian. You probably know me from the channel that you watch. You probably also know my guest, Brennan Lee Mulligan, who is here from Dimension 20. Hi, Brennan.
Woo! 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 What's up, Tulok? Hell yeah! Hi, I'm Brennan. It's so nice to be here.
Yeah. Unsleeping City Season 2 just started. If you haven't seen Season 1, go check that out on dropout.tv. But we're gonna be talking about Dungeons and Dragons today. We're gonna be talking about New York City, the Big Apple, the biggest of apples, maybe the largest apple.
The biggest apple that e'er there was.
Yes.
You're talking the city that never sleeps. You're talking the city of dreams.
Yes.
This is the crown jewel of the Empire State. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes. So many things. So all of the seasons kind of have their own special vibe, but I think because the Unsleeping City takes place in New York, it's got a very specific vibe. Since like 90% of what is happening in a place that tangibly exists and a person could go to. Does that make it harder for you to build out the world, or does that help you build out the world with like some little brackets and structures?
Well, that's an awesome question. And you've hit on one of the things that led us to the Unsleeping City right away, right? So one of the challenging things, like every type of actual play show has its own unique challenges, right? So many of my wonderful friends and collaborators, Brian Murphy, Murph, who's the DM for NADPOD and is a player on Dimension 20, Matt Mercer with Critical Role, the McElroys when they do their long form podcast. A lot of these places will spend 50, 75, 100, 150 episodes in the same campaign world, right? Dimension 20, the longest season we ever spent, Fantasy High sophomore year, we were there for like 24 episodes, right? Yeah. So most of our seasons are very, we are an anthology show. We do these short, punchy, like tune in for 40 hours, 50 hours of whatever content, and you're going to get a full storyline. And so to answer your question with the Unsleeping City, part of what drew me to that setting is my own familiarity with New York City. Because when, every 3 months we're in a new world telling a new story, one of the things you quickly learn as a dungeon master doing media or content in that way is something that helps sustainability is rubrics for world design that rely on pre-established work, right?
Yes.
So like the amount of work that went into a setting like Calorum for A Crown of Candy, which is whole cloth, was way more work than went into the Unsleeping City, because in the Unsleeping City, all I have to do is go, here's a city that I love, that I know like the back of my hand, and let's put this filter of the fantastical on it, of urban fantasy. And all of a sudden, very quickly, you have the skeleton of this unseen, hidden, magical world. And if I ever need to improvise something, like if you went like, Brennan, my character decides to go down to Christopher Street, what's going on? I go, okay, well, you go to Fat Cat, and there's jazz, there's live jazz, there's pool tables, and probably a real-life magical fat cat. There's a big fat cat smoking a cigar in the corner and having a great time. So that is a big part of the world building of the Unsleeping City, was that idea of using familiarity with a real life location to aid with world building, both in a pre-production sense and also in terms of having a freedom of improvisation, of feeling more confident about being able to come up with magical versions of real life places.
There's so many good moments from Unsleeping City Season 1 that are enhanced by just your specific knowledge of New York. I know, like on actually, you're kind of a legend for your like encyclopedic knowledge of things. So that like seeing that kind of come out of the nerddom, which as nerds, I think we all sort of have a little bit of like that encyclopedic, we know a little bit too much about Star Wars for it to be comfortable, but to see it in like a geographical real city thing is very, very cool.
So I get that. First of all, very kind of you to say. I will say this: I love Actually more than anybody there. I think routine. I do not. I would say for myself, I do not crack the top 5 of actual nerd competitors
Right.
on that show. And this is something that I think people that watch them actually would appreciate is the success I have had on them actually largely comes from not a better breadth of nerd knowledge than my wonderful competitors. Like Ify Wadiway is
Oh,
unstoppable. Siobhan Thompson is unreal.
yes.
But I worked as a writer for a long time on Actually. So a lot of the success I've had on the show Actually is not due to actually being nerdier than my other wonderful arch nerds, but because I know Trap's mind and I know where to look in the questions for
Yes.
where the weird thing is going to be.
It's learning how to take the test rather than how to study for the test.
I think that's really it at the end of the day. I think that it's a how to take the test thing. Now, that being said, just to give props where I feel props are due. What I will also say though is that in terms of that nerdiness, my dad would never call himself a nerd, but his depth and breadth of knowledge of New York City history is a big informing factor to specifically this season of the Unsleeping City, which in many ways is like a very personal, like kind of like love letter to my dad and the trips we would take in New York City, with him dragging me around the city and being like, this used to be the place where, Boss Tweed met with the original William Poole who did XYZ thing. And he's like pointing at a Dunkin' Donuts and I'm 8 and I'm like, Dad, I want to go home.
I would like a donut.
I would like a donut. Yeah. And as I got older, I realized how deeply grateful I was for that, because there's a big, I think that like, obviously the biggest share of my nerddom, I think, comes directly from my mom, who was a comic book writer and got me into D&D. Like she was the one who got me into the D&D group, and she was a big Celtic and Arthurian scholar. So I get a big heaping helping of nerdiness from mom. But I think the Unsleeping City in particular, my dad did a lot for me growing up, of being like, all these things that seem mundane have stories behind them. And if you study history and if you learn about the stories that exist in these real places, nothing will ever be boring to you again. You will never look at a Dunkin' Donuts on a random corner and go, that's just some Dunkin' Donuts. You'll go, actually, this is the street corner where the 3rd mayor of New York got into a bar fight and got stabbed by a member of the state legislature. This is the neighborhood where your ancestors immigrated to the country and were involved in a brawl back when there were 2 competing fire departments that were actually just kind of gangsters, and they would beat the shit out of each other, competing over fires because different people paid them different protection rackets. And you learn this history of the place that you've lived. And, the thing that urban fantasy does, which is try to impart to you that feeling we all get, where we see bits of urban decay or we see bits of something and we go, no, there's a fairyland here. I know there is. And my dad's love for history, I think in big part made me look at the city and be like, there's nothing about this that is just mundane. There's a story behind all of this. So yeah, that's my roundabout tangential way of answering your question.
No, you're absolutely fine. We're here to interview you, right? Okay, so New York, I have been there once. I was in high school, so I had no agency. We did a lot of like touristy things, so I hit most of the tourist stuff, Statue of Liberty, Top of the Rock, that kind of stuff. But for like reference on like a South Dakota high school teenager going, we ate at Applebee's twice in a week in New York. So travel's still restricted. I'm not planning on going tomorrow, but if I were to go back to New York as an adult, spare no expense, what should I do?
Whoa. So it's this very interesting thing, right? One of the greatest New Yorkers of all time is Tony Bourdain, who so sadly passed away one of the best ambassadors for the city and the culture of the city that I think there's ever been. So there's a weird thing where New Yorkers on the one hand have a big chip on their shoulders about tourists, right? Because, you know, you live there and you're going about your business, and depending on what neighborhood you're in, you're like, shit, I'm late for work. And you're running along and some, you know, schmo jumps off a bus and is like, New York, the city where dreams are. And you're like, get the fuck out of the way. You're gumming up the sidewalk. But other side of the coin, the city is absolutely a beacon for people to come and be in the city of dreams. Like, in a very real way, there is a big part of the New York story, which is people who, for one reason or another, can't be themselves in wherever they are. And the city affords them that. So I think there's like a healthy mix of, if you're coming to visit a place, going with that Tony Bourdain attitude of like respectfulness, of not treating it like a tourist experience, of being like, I am here to humble myself in a place where I am not a native, and I'm going to come and try to really embrace the culture here as respectfully as possible. But then also definitely the part of like, yeah, there's so much of New York that its economy thrives on tourism. We need people to come and go see Broadway shows and do all the things here that, you know, people do. Like, the city is built to, at any given point in time, I think there's like 2 million active tourists in New York. Like, the tourist population of New York is bigger than most cities in America. So,
yes.
So it's like there is a yin and yang to all of this, right? What I would say is, if you like, the best way to go to New York, this is a weird suggestion, the best way to go to New York, I feel like, would be to stay with a friend or stay with someone that has a routine that they can impart on you, right? If you have friends or family in the city, staying with them, because there is so much beauty to the city in just like neighborhoods that are not going to have a landmark for you to go see, and for you to go like support those smaller businesses and support those other places that are really like from native New Yorkers, and to support those places, like you're saying, rather than going and eating at Applebee's 2 times in the same week. So the places I would throw out and suggest, you know, there's the big touristy places like Statue of Liberty, Times Square. I would say, as someone that used to live in Hell's Kitchen, the only times I've ever gone to Times Square or brought someone to Times Square because I wanted them to see it was at like 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. You have to go there because Times Square is the deepest pit of hell for 22 hours out of the day. But if you can go when no one else is there, it's worth being there when you're sleep-addled and, you know, you've been awake for several days because you're going to film school, and you go, woo, and you walk through and be like, there's a lot of lights. It's very, very bright here in the very, very middle of the night. I feel like the hidden places that I would shout out are like, God, what are the places that I miss the most? Like doing the classic like dinner in Chinatown, dessert in Little Italy is like a Mulligan family tradition. Like, go to Wohop down in Chinatown, just like stuff yourself with the best food in the world, and then walk a couple blocks to Little Italy and grab a cannoli and a coffee for dessert. You will never regret it. And I would say too, if you're on a budget, which I feel like a lot of tourist advice should acknowledge how expensive the city is. Back when I was broke, as a joke, we would go to Vanessa's on Eldridge Street, which is in Chinatown as well. 4 dumplings for $1. So me and my roommates would go. I might be giving away the store here, but I'm like, this is
we can cut this out. You have final cut on this interview.
Final cut. I'm trying to think. Am I giving away too many good secrets? This is if you're only listen to this if you are actually broke and living in New York and need a hand, because then it's a magical panacea. If you have money, stay away. Don't go gentrify this place.
Yeah.
But Vanessa's on Eldridge Street was incredible because back when me and my roommates were like, really at the point where like multiple meals a day were like microwave ramen with 1 egg cracked into it to give us the protein and fat we needed. And you could just see if one of the roommates started going gray in the eyes from like overwork, exhaustion, and financial panic, we would be like, hey, it's been a couple months. Like, we're going to go to Vanessa's on Eldridge Street, because you could drop $5, get 20 dumplings, and just give your soul that feeling of abundance of like, okay, like, I'm not on the razor's edge. Like, look, I had a big meal. I had a feast. Like, this is going to sustain me spiritually for the next whatever amount of time. In terms of other New York recommendations, I think there's a lot of like great free landmarks. Again, in my head, it's always like doing it on a budget. There are things that I often see people don't see a lot of. Staten Island Ferry is like the best way to see the Statue of Liberty. Because if you go to the actual Liberty Island, you're like staring up at this enormous colossus. Staten Island Ferry is free, baby. Go take a ride out of Staten Island, take a ride back, do it at sunset. One of the best, back when I was a broke college student, I needed to take somebody out on a date, which is always a harrowing experience when you're broke. Staten Island Ferry is like actually kind of a beautiful, especially if you go around sunset, it's like a beautiful romantic place to go. You're out on the water. And then other things, Central Park, of course, is the greatest and best. And little things people don't go to like the boat pond as much, or they don't see like the beautiful Alice. There's an incredible larger than life Alice in Wonderland statue there.
Remember that. I remember that from when I went.
Oh, incredible. When I was a little kid growing up in the city, I would climb all over that for hours and hours, because you can climb under the mushrooms and there's little like caterpillars and other characters hidden that only little kids can find there. God, it's incredible. It's very new and bougie, but the High Line is another free thing that is truly, truly beautiful. The High Line is an old elevated railway that has become a kind of green eco park and sculpture system. And it's just like, it's in Chelsea. It ends on Gansevoort Street, and you can walk it. And again, beautiful. So it's like a park in Midtown-ish Manhattan that you can walk. That goes sort of from Midtown down to the lower, sort of like the Village area, Gansevoort Street. And there are, there's so much. And again, I can't really, like a walk over the Brooklyn Bridge is just so, so beautiful and great. And again, I would say like, there are great landmark things, but there are like, if you go to New York, go to a bodega, like go to a corner deli in the morning, get a bacon, egg, and cheese with a cup of coffee. Go get an everything bagel with cream cheese. The best pizza in New York is not gonna, like, yes, you can go to Patsy's or Grimaldi's, like the original pizza places. You got to just go to the hole in the wall, like Original Ray's. You got to go to the Fat Sal's, like the classic pizza slices. There's nothing that beats it, which is not to say that it's dollar pizza, which also slaps, but dollar pizza is a very different experience from a good, like the classic, like, $2 slice or whatever that you're going to get. It's going to be like, the size of your torso. I could talk about, I miss my home so much.
Is that something that Unsleeping City lets you tap into? Just like kind of reconnecting with New York?
Unbelievably so. Unbelievably so. New York is the greatest and best city in the world. It is. There are very few American cities like it. Like, I live in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a wonderful place. As a place, it is wonderful, right?
Right.
CollegeHumor happened to me here. I met my wonderful partner, Izzy, here. Los Angeles has been very, very good to me. For a very large percentage of Angelenos, the experience of this place as a city that's not what it's about, right? You have your home, maybe you have relationships with your neighbors, depending on the neighborhood you live in, but you're probably either, and there are a lot of Angelenos that use public transportation, but there are also a lot that use cars, and their experience of the city is often one of detachment from their neighbors. Like, if you look at the largest civic spaces within Los Angeles, what is it? The Grove, the Americana? These are malls. These are malls, right? With New York, you go to Union Square in the farmer's market, or you go to like the holiday market there, you're seeing your neighbors all the time. And even with other incredible American cities like New Orleans, right? Or other world cities like, London, Istanbul, right? Hanoi, like places that are beautiful and amazing to be in. One of the things that New York has in common with a lot of them is that there actually is a culture you are ensconced in when you walk out your front door. You are on the subway with your neighbors, with the people that share your community with you. And even if sometimes you're like in a fucking hot, sweaty subway car with the AC broken and you're like pressed up against someone else's armpit while they're holding the overhead railing, that discomfort is spiritually important because it forces you to confront the shared humanity you have with your neighbors. And I think that that's something I miss a lot in how easy it is in other American living situations to abstract the idea of the real human beings that you are cohabitating with, that they become somehow, partially fictional in your head because of how easy it is to organize your life around not dealing with them. So I miss New York a lot. And then also, again, just for how much beauty there is in every square inch of the city. Like, I think people think there's something wrong with New Yorkers, but like when I walk down a street with mountains of trash bags on it, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that experience just for being visceral, for being a thing that happened to me that day, versus living in a place, and again, I don't want to shit talk the lovely city of Los Angeles, which I am very happy here, but like the seasons pass and nothing changes. There's never snow on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Days sort of blend together. And my experiences in LA, such a huge proportion of them is just like work and my personal life of who I choose to associate with, rather than New York, where it's like, maybe you go outside your door and see the wildest thing you've ever seen. And for a quick moment, the city imparts on you that there's other stuff going on than just your life.
Yes. Wonderful.
Yeah.
To get a little more into New York, the Unsleeping City does a great job of covering different facets of life in New York. Season 1, Kugrash lives in the subway, and Misty Moore is a famous Broadway star. I know season 2 has already started, but are there any facets of New York? I mean, it's such a huge city. It's so wildly diverse across different spectrums of economic, social, racial classes. Are there facets of New York that you're still eager to explore in the Unsleeping City and put your own magical fantasy spin upon?
Yes, we get to a lot more places like that in the city, and kind of like throughout the season too. There's not necessarily front loaded. Like there's a lot of things that I probably can't mention because they're not going to be revealed until later on in the season. But there are a bunch of different fun like neighborhoods and characters and elements of world building, both from like new types of people we get to see, and especially like Cody as this like Astoria mall goth, and then Iga as this like classic like basement psychic, which is a huge part of New York, of like walking on some residential street and then a bit of neon pops up and like, there's a psychic shop down there. Is such a real part of the city as well. And then also getting into the magical cosmology. I think that we handle themes in this one that straddle a divide about commentary about the city's kind of sociology, and then things about the city's kind of like individual psychology. Like there are themes in the major plot lines of this season that are kind of personal in a way, dealing with like what happens to all the people that moved to New York to start a life for themselves and then are suddenly in a city that can be hard to live in and are like by themselves. And like, what does that mean for people? So I am very excited about getting to delve into not only fun, wacky, magical shenanigans, and also I think there's some fun world building this season too, if I can say, about things that happened in season 1, which I always love to do when you go back to a setting and you're like, no, like dominoes are still falling based on shit you guys did a long time ago.
have 2 new characters this season. This is time for, it's time for Dungeons and Dragons DM talking. How do you go about, as the DM, bringing in new player characters to kind of an established group? That's always been a challenge for me if a character dies or if someone wants to change. Is there anything you do as a DM to facilitate that?
It is a huge goddamn challenge. And it's taken me a long time to figure out how to do it. Because we've all had that experience. If you've been in a game that had PC lethality in it and a PC has died or like left or whatever, you know, any kind of other narrative thing where a PC leaves, there is always that hardship of a new character is going to come in. They're going to have to join up with the group largely for metagame reasons, right? Like we all know that there's kind of like in more often than not, metagaming is a pejorative. We don't want to metagame, right? I would make the argument there are some ways that metagaming is a good thing. Like I think we all know that moment of like, boy, it would be really cool if this other PC was in this scene listening to this shit that has to do with their backstory. And we all kind of like, we know it's metagaming, but we're like, go, get in there, you know, like, and that could be a positive version of metagaming. For the most part, metagaming you want to avoid. It's not a good thing to do. However, when a PC dies, we all know what has to happen, which is everybody got to make a new best friend. This rando is going to show up. And because IRL, we all love Steve and want Steve to have a good time, we now have to have, you know, Brunhilde become friends with Gandor. And it's like, okay, now Gandor's a buddy. And that can be really jarring. And I think too, especially because, look, a lot of times a player that has just lost a beloved character can sometimes maybe like be having a hard time drumming up excitement for their new character. Not always. I think actually sometimes the reverse happens where a PC death is very, very sad until a player realizes they get to make a new character and can make them starting at a higher level. And you go, oh, wait, there's cool stuff I can do now. My biggest piece of advice is this. DMs aren't supposed to play favorites. Play favorites for the first couple sessions that the new PC comes in.
Sure.
Like your player just lost a character, that can be rough. And one of the best ways to endear a new PC to a party is for you to look at your plot and try to make them more important and be like, hey, you guys have been fighting against Skull Lord Thrazagar for, you know, Thrazagar. We hate Thrazagar. We booed Thrazagar. And you've been getting, and clearly whatever just happened that killed a PC was probably a pretty bad beat. So you guys are like on the ropes immediately following a PC death. Have new PC roll up with a map to the artifact. Have new PC roll up and be like, listen, I am a scion of this lost order of knights. Check it out. We have been training for 1,000 years to defeat Thrazagar. And now this like rattled group of people that just lost their friend, they don't have to be like, hey, I know that we just had a huge moment of grief where we lost a close friend. Let's make a brand new friend.
Yeah.
They get, you know, it's really hard. Why would this completely gutted group of PCs suddenly like open their hearts? Don't rely on them to open their hearts. Rely on them to seize an opportunity to get back at villain X that just fucked them over and killed one of their friends, right? So if the new PC rolls up, and again, I think you can avoid some of that stuff of like, I'm my old character's twin brother, right? Like I wouldn't go that route. But I think that what you can do is like, for example, in this season, we can already kind of see, even though we're only 2 episodes in, you can already kind of see Iga and Cody are removed. Iga has been inducted into the Unsleeping City, but has been neutral and aloof and removed from it for like a long, long, long time. She's a mom. She's got 2 young kids. She's like, I'm not going out and doing superhero shit. Like, yes, I'm magic, but fuck all this adventure. I'm busy, right? Murph plays a character that becomes magical in episode 1, gets inducted into the Unsleeping City episode 1, right? And is the new kid on the block. Both of them are catalyst characters. Iga has her chest. Cody has this infernal contract with Bazithrax, who's the sub-lord of reckless decisions in the 9 hells. And you end up seeing them as being like they roll up what they are lacking in pre-existing relationships, they offer in plot significance. I think that's the way you introduce a new PC. You go, cool, you are not going to have the inside jokes. You don't have the years of history. You don't have all that shared spilled blood. So what do you have? You have the birthmark on your body that leads us to the hidden artifact. You're part of the ancient order that's been fighting this for a long, long time. You come in mid-combat and save everybody's ass and go, I've heard about you guys. I've been coming to save you all. And I think give them that, like, if you can, work with the players that are making the new character to not have them be a rando. One of the nice things about this new character is, unlike meeting everybody in a tavern at the beginning of session 1, they will be able to come in and go, their introduction gets the full spotlight. And they get to go like, hey, here's specifically the resources I can offer as we move into this next leg of the journey.
Sure. And it helps to have wonderful players as well. You've got the best players. You always have the best players. Everyone knows you got the best players.
We're so goddamn lucky. You know, like the core cast are some of my best friends in the goddamn world. We've played so much together. I love them all so much. And in our side quests, we are like so goofily fortunate to play with such like all-star heavy hitter D&D players, like Pirates of Leviathan, you know, like Tiny Heist, the Blood Keep, like nuts, truly nuts.
In that vein, if you could have any 4 people at your table, living, dead, fictional, non-fictional, that are playing your game, and not anyone that you've already played with on the show, because I don't want you to be like, who's your favorite people? Who are your favorite friends, Brennan? But who would they, if you had 4?
Favorite 4 people that I can bring. This is, I don't know if you ever saw the CollegeHumor sketch Winning at Everything. I'm having a moment of this right now. Immediately you said 4 people living or dead, and my first thing that I wanted to do was ask you, if I pick dead people, do they come back to life permanently because of the game we are playing?
They can only interact at the D&D table, and they can break character, but only to be like,
so
pass the chips, please.
So I can't bring back like Jonas Salk and get him to work on the COVID vaccine.
No.
Okay, cool.
Not
You can. That's where my head goes.
I'm watching. No,
that's where it wants to go. Oh wow. Ooh.
And fictional or non-fictional. If you want to see what Gandalf would be like playing a barbarian, that's also, because hey, you're on my channel. You're in Tulok Town.
Whoa.
So favorite fictional characters, not only in D&D but playing D&D, is also an option.
First 2 that come to mind, because I could think about this all day.
Yes.
And so I'm going to jump on my gut instincts at first. There are 2 currently living fantasy authors that are actually in the realm of, like, one of them actually does play D&D, I know for a fact. And the other one is, I believe, close friends with Tanya DePass, who's an incredible D&D luminary, who are 2 of my favorite fantasy authors. So I would say Pat Rothfuss and N.K. Jemisin would be amazing to play D&D with. Pat Rothfuss does the Kingkiller Chronicles. N.K. Jemisin did Broken Earth, you know, the 5th season is the first book of that trilogy. Would be incredible to play D&D with.
I love that you're thinking about group dynamic too. You're not just like, who are 4 people I want to sit next to? You're like, but like, how would they play off of each other?
Right. I feel like N.K. Jemisin and Pat Rothfuss would be, I just love their writing and their world building and everything about them is so fucking cool that I just would really love to maybe like this is so hard. Maybe Ursula K. Le Guin, easy. I just forgot Wizard of Earthsea. This is like an all authors game. I actually dig this.
Authors are fantastic D&D players because everyone who's doing writing has that like creative energy and that desire to kind of push towards an arc. I think that some people don't quite have as much. They're just sort of like, and my character's gonna go keep hitting things, hooray! Yeah. But like, I love the arc.
And then just for how influential Sandman was to me growing up, I'm going to go Neil Gaiman for number 4. So that's my 4.
That's a pick.
Pat Rothfuss, N.K. Jemisin, Ursula K. Le Guin, Neil Gaiman. Boom.
I was just going to say the 4 Ninja Turtles, so you put a lot more thought into it than I did. Actually, no, I don't think I would want Raph. I feel like Raph couldn't handle a Nat 1. Right?
Hell yeah. Yeah.
So Splinter comes in, and then Raph, waits outside. You sort of talked about LA. You've been in LA for a while.
Yeah.
Unsleeping City, Los Angeles. What do you think that would look like? Would it sort of be, because I know Frank Sinatra lyrics played a big part in Unsleeping City lore.
Yes.
There's if you make it here, you can make it, the Imperial Axiom.
Yes.
Which is just a very fun joke that is just hidden in there, that if you make it here, you can make it anywhere. Very good joke.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I have never put that much groundwork into a joke before. A joke with truly a 10 episode setup.
Yeah. And that is crucial to the end game of the season.
Yes. Truly, totally bizarre.
But would the Beach Boys be the California equivalent of a Frank Sinatra?
So if I were going to do, and again, I feel a lot more comfort being extemporaneous on New York, right? Because
sure.
I'm from there, I grew up, I was basically I grew up there as a little kid and then split time between New York and my mom's place upstate. And then, moved there permanently when I was 17 and lived there until I was 29. But so Los Angeles, I feel less, I wouldn't want to let an Angelino be the person to sort of
sure.
that. That being said, I feel like cities have a magic to them throughout the world of the Unsleeping City. New York's not the only magical city in the world.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that every city has a relationship to supernal realms in the same way. New York is particularly attached to the dreaming. That is the world that it most, that is the sort of outer plane that it aligns with the most strongly. To me, if I were going to do Los Angeles, if I had to do a one shot in Los Angeles,
sure,
it would clearly have all kinds of fairies and devils and angels in it, just like the Unsleeping City does. But I think that there's something about it. It feels like it would draw from celestial stuff the most, the degree of presence of the sun here, that it is a very sun-baked city. Los Angeles itself,
the angels,
the city of angels. I think I would do a very Abrahamic, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, this is a city that would have a lot of those, the kind of folklore of those 3 faiths in it to a great degree, and maybe have that thing of not only angels, but a lot of fallen angels here. Maybe there is a lot of infernal stuff here as well. Although I do have to say, if I was going to pick the city in the continental United States that had the strongest pull to the infernal, Las Vegas, no question. That is absolutely, if you only get to put your hellmouth in one city, it's Las Vegas 10 out of 10 times.
I think if you did Unsleeping City LA, it's close enough to Las Vegas that you could conceivably have a section where they go to Vegas.
Yes, 100%. It's even isn't Death Valley in between the two of them? Is there some weird psychopomp relationship there where it's Death Valley and then you have to choose between heaven or hell? Oh, I love that. That's great. Yes, so I think the idea of a celestially aligned Los Angeles and that being its central focal point of magic is a cool thing.
I do want to just quickly touch on, got a background in improv comedy and sketch comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Dungeon mastering is sort of a combination of planned and improvised. Mm-hmm. Do you think you pull more from the improv or the like hard writing? Does it vary between the home games and Dimension 20? Which one's more improv heavy? Which one's more structured?
Right. That's a great question. Well, obviously, there is such a tremendous amount of prep work that goes into the Dimension 20 seasons. Rick Perry and his amazing team, the battle sets they make, crafting characters ahead of time, the degree to which the plot has to be structured around the battle sets and everything else like that. But I still think improv takes the cake. I still think that if you made me choose between, like, here's the thing, you can't run a game without improv.
Right.
I could probably stumble through a pretty wonky theater of the mind season with no prep time. You know what I mean? Like, I would be sweating bullets the whole time and be like, but if you went like, Brennan, go now, do a campaign, I'd be like, oh, okay, here we go. Like, and
There's
jump
a troll.
into
It's attacking.
There's a troll is attacking you. Whereas if you were like, hey, we're going to give you 3 years to prepare, but you're not allowed to have characters say dialogue that's not scripted. You have to prepare for every eventuality. 10 out of 10 times I go, give me the improv one. That's going to be easier. Sure. And it's going to be better. It's going to be more fun.
Yes.
So I think improv. I think I go improv.
Wonderful. I said that was the last one, but I do have a fun little thing that I want to go out on. In the first question, I don't know if you know this, people who are watching this back, in the first question, you kind of tee up every other question I had in somewhere in there. So back to the first question, you talked about how Unsleeping City, a big part of it was attributed to your dad and his interest in the history of New York. You've played a bunch of fantastic dads as NPCs. Everyone loves the Brennan dads. I do have a little game that I worked up of some fictional dads, and I want your opinions on which dad is the best dad, because I'm not sure if this was a part of your childhood, but my dad could beat your dad, that kind of thing.
The time has come to rank dads, and I'm here for it.
It's dad time. So are you seeing the Ultimate Dad Championship?
Oh my God, I've never been more delighted in my life.
Wonderful. Okay, so first round, I've got 5 rounds of dads.
Let's do it.
If you don't know any of these dads, that's fine. We'll just cut that bit out. But first, I've got classic dads. We've got Atticus Finch, George Bailey, To Kill a Mockingbird, It's a Wonderful Life. Which dad?
Atticus.
I think so too.
Atticus. George loses his shit a little bit too much for me. Like, True. He slaps Uncle Billy around a little bit. He like kind of pops off. And I think that if you're a dad, one of the biggest tasks is you really can't pop off. You know, it's okay to you can communicate that you're upset. You can communicate that you're disappointed. You can even let people know that you might be angry, but you can't get physical. You can't use your physical mass to intimidate people. So as wonderful as George Bailey is, I think he loses his temper a little bit too much for me. I got to go Atticus. Speaking
of threatening dads who, let's go into the sitcom dad category. Carl Winslow or Danny Tanner? I think the unifying factor in these two dads, other than being on sitcoms, is their absolute, pure, unadulterated hatred of their neighbor children. And the whole time you were like, George Bailey loses his stuff too much, I am just thinking of Carl Winslow and Danny Tanner. Danny more verbally taking it out on Kimmy Gibbler. But
yes. So here's where I have to give an asterisk as well, which is to say that I think grumpiness does not cross over into aggressiveness for me. I think dads might actually be required to be grumpy from time to time.
Sure.
These are both great dads. I am going to give it to Carl Winslow, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel like Danny Tanner has such a dad adjacent squad with him,
sure,
that it is not fair to full credit Danny Tanner. It's not a one-man show with Danny Tanner. right?
He's got a full house.
He's got a full house, right? Carl Winslow is doing a lot of the lifting without these like multiple uncle support network around him. So I think that you have to give credit where credit is due. I think you got to go Carl Winslow on this one.
Up next, Ghost Dads, Jarrell and Mufasa. Some of the best ghosty dads giving advice from beyond the grave. Which dad is pulling its weight more?
Mufasa. It's got to be Mufasa. Mufasa.
I have my own opinions about Mufasa and his subjugation of the hyenas, but we'll move on to another James Earl Jones dad, because it's time for bad dads. It's the anti-dad round. Darth Vader and Walter White, both very bad dads. But what dad's the worst dad?
So this is a hard one because there's a definite conversation about who is a worse person. Walter White never gets a body count even close to Darth Vader, right? So you kind of have to go Darth Vader is the worst guy, right?
Yes.
In terms of like fatherness,
I think both of... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, here's the question. Darth Vader never actually, I think, gets an opportunity to display what his paternal behavior would have been like. Like, by the time he comes away from his lava and lightsaber related wounds, after he gets, fucked up by Obi-Wan, the kids are gone by that point. And when he interacts with Luke, we actually see him wanting Luke to join him. Again, as a person, Darth Vader, irreparable, a true monster, fascist. We hate space Nazis, right?
Yes.
But I think that you have more instances of canon, like abusiveness and bad fatherhood on Walter White's part, whereas Darth Vader is a very, very bad space Nazi, but we actually don't really get a chance to see what he would have been like as a dad.
I will suggest both also have like big mentor-mentee relationships, with Darth Vader having Ahsoka Tano and Walter White having Jesse Pinkman, who Walter White eventually becomes more of a dad to than, like, Walt Jr. kind of goes away like about 4 seasons in.
Yeah.
But that does not help either of them really.
Yes.
Both of them kind of tried to kill their pseudo not child as well.
I suspect if Darth Vader had gotten a shot to be a dad, he would be a very bad dad. That being said, we have to go off the record. Like, if we're judging this like kind of like a season of sports, it's like, well, the person never got up at bat, so we don't know how many strikes they would have gotten. You know, like, so yeah.
Really, the only dad moment is just throwing the Emperor down the tube and then dying. So it is a good, but also, you know, Walt saves Jet. We could be here all day. I've got one last category of dad, and that's the uncle dads. These are the dads that aren't your dad. They're your uncle, but they're your dad. Uncle Iroh, Uncle Ben.
Damn. I think probably you got to go Uncle Iroh, right? But Uncle Ben packs a pretty big wallop. For a dude, like, if you're gonna go like ROI, you're gonna go like, hey, how much dadding did you do per minute on screen? Like, Uncle Ben's batting average is incredible, right? Like, the guy got
one line creates Spider-Man.
Yeah, man. Like, Uncle Iroh probably has more good dad moments over the entire series because of all the screen time he gets, but maybe has fewer foibles as a result of that. Like, if you're Uncle Ben, it's like you come up to bat, you're just a sweet, sweet dude. You say a bomb thing that creates a superhero, and you're gone. So
drop the mic.
Drop the mic. He's, you know, like, prior to Go Set a Watchman, it's sort of like Harper Lee publishes one book, it's To Kill a Mockingbird. It's like mic drop, one thing, I'm out. It was perfect later. Yeah, that's very, very funny. I think I maybe go Uncle Ben here. It's just you can't like that one line mic drop. I think I go Uncle Ben.
I think I am going to disagree with you. I'm going to go Uncle Iroh, just because I think being able to breathe fire is a huge dad asset. That Uncle Ben does not even bring anything close to that to the table.
You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, firebending is very, very cool. I changed my mind. Uncle Iroh. Yeah, it's Uncle Iroh, actually.
Uncle Iroh.
If Uncle Ben had bent fire just one time, I think I would. Yeah.
Not even once. If he doesn't even attempt it.
Not even one. If he had just been like, Pete, with great power comes great responsibility. And then big gout of flame, I would have been like, that fucking rules, Uncle Ben. But he didn't.
No.
He didn't.
Absolute failure. Well, I think this was an absolute success of an interview, and a good time was had by all. Brennan, plug yourself. Where can the people find you? What do you want to plug?
Hey, it's Dimension 20. You can find me there. Dimension 20 is airing new episodes of Chapter 2 of the Unsleeping City every Wednesday on dropout.tv. Go check us out. If you're like, hey, I didn't see Chapter 1, check it out. That's for free on YouTube. You can go find, go to Dimension 20 on YouTube, and you can find the entire season there, along with a bunch of other free seasons of the show. And you can find me at Brennan LM on Twitter and at Brennan Lee Mulligan on Instagram. Thanks so much for this awesome interview.
Of course. Thank you so much for hanging out. Again, it's an honor and a privilege to have you on. Everybody go check out Brennan. Everybody go check out Dimension 20. Check out all the stuff on dropout.tv. It's fantastic. I'm so bad at ending videos. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.